Welcome to WW2 Heroic Tales, where true stories of courage, sacrifice, and extraordinary heroism come alive from the darkest days of World War II. Join us as we uncover the untold moments that shaped history. In the annals of warfare, there are soldiers, and then there are legends. For over 2 centuries, the Gurkhas of Nepal have carved a reputation from the very bedrock of courage. Recruited into the British and Indian armies since the Anglo-Nepalese War of the early 1800s, these warriors from the Himalayan foothills became renowned for their unmatched discipline, resilience, and ferocity in combat. Their iconic weapon, the forward-curving kukri knife, is a symbol of their martial heritage. But their true weapon has always been an indomitable spirit, captured in their motto, Kafar hunu banda marnu ramro, better to die than be a coward. By 1945, this reputation had been tested and proven on the battlefields of the First World War in North Africa and across Europe. But it was in the suffocating jungles of Southeast Asia, in the brutal, final days of the Burma Campaign, that the legend would be forged anew in the actions of one man. This was the theater of the so-called Forgotten Army, the British 14th Army under General William Slim, locked in a desperate struggle against the tenacious forces of Imperial Japan. The conditions were apocalyptic: torrential monsoon rains, energy-sapping humidity, and a landscape riddled with disease. The fighting was intimate, savage, and often fought at close quarters in dense foliage that could hide an enemy just feet away. The Japanese soldiers, driven by the code of Bushido, were formidable opponents who rarely surrendered, often fighting to the last man with a fanaticism that shocked Allied troops. It was in this unforgiving environment that the Gurkhas excelled. Their upbringing in the rugged mountains of Nepal gave them a natural advantage in the harsh terrain, and their steadfast courage made them the tip of the spear in countless assaults against fortified Japanese positions. This is the world that shaped rifleman Lachhiman Gurung, a quiet young man who was about to demonstrate the true meaning of the Gurkha spirit. Lachhiman Gurung was born in December 1917 in a remote village in the Tanahan district of Nepal, a world away from the global conflict that would later define his life. Like many young men of his generation, he was small in stature, standing at just 4 feet 11 inches tall, a height that had initially caused him to be rejected by army recruiters. But what he lacked in physical height, he more than made up for in resolve. He eventually enlisted in the 8th Gurkha Rifles, a distinguished regiment of the British Indian Army. By May 1945, the war in Europe was over, but in Asia, the fight raged on. The 14th Army was pushing the Japanese forces back through Burma in a relentless, island-hopping style campaign fought on the mainland. The objective was to recapture the country and reopen the vital Burma Road to supply Allied forces in China. The fighting had reached the west bank of the Irrawaddy River, near a settlement called Taungdaw. Here, the Japanese were mounting a desperate last stand. Having been pushed back for months, they were now digging in, determined to inflict maximum casualties and slow the Allied advance. Rifleman Gurung was part of B Company, 4th Battalion of the 8th Gurkha Rifles. His unit was tasked with holding a series of forward positions, lonely outposts pushed deep into contested territory, designed to act as tripwires and observation posts against Japanese infiltration. On the night of May 12th, Gurung and two other riflemen were ordered to man the most advanced of these positions. Their trench was little more than a scrape in the earth, positioned on a small rise that offered a commanding view of the surrounding jungle. It was an isolated, vulnerable spot, a tiny island of defense in a sea of hostile wilderness. The air was thick and heavy with the smell of damp earth and decaying vegetation. The sounds of the jungle at night, a cacophony of insects and unseen creatures, provided a constant, unnerving soundtrack. The pre-monsoon heat was suffocating. For the three men, the mission was simple: hold their ground, observe enemy movement, and raise the alarm if attacked. They had no idea that they were sitting directly in the path of a major Japanese counterattack, and that over 200 enemy soldiers were at that very moment moving silently through the darkness towards their lonely post. The attack came without warning. One moment, the night was filled with the familiar drone of the jungle. The next, it was shattered by a cacophony of rifle fire, explosions, and terrifying shouts. The darkness erupted as over 200 soldiers of the Japanese 33rd Army swarmed out of the tree line. This was not a probing attack. It was a full-scale assault, a furious human wave intended to overwhelm and annihilate the forward Gurkha positions. Lachhiman Gurung and his two comrades were instantly engulfed. Their small trench was the very focal point of the assault. Bullets ripped through the air above their heads, thudding into the earthen parapet of their foxhole. The sound of Japanese non-commissioned officers screaming orders mixed with the distinctive crack of Arasaka rifles. The Gurkhas responded instantly, their training taking over. They laid down fire with their own bolt-action Lee-Enfield No. 4 rifles, the heavy 303 caliber rounds tearing into the approaching enemy ranks. But they were catastrophically outnumbered. The sheer weight of fire directed at their position was immense. Almost immediately, both of Gurung's comrades were hit and severely wounded, their rifles falling silent. Suddenly, Lachhiman Gurung was alone. His position was compromised, his fellow soldiers incapacitated, and a relentless enemy was closing in from all sides. In that moment of absolute chaos and terror, standard military doctrine would suggest a tactical withdrawal, to fall back to the main company line and regroup. But that was not the Gurkha way. His orders were to hold the post, and for Rifleman Gurung, those orders were absolute. He knew that if his position fell, the Japanese would have a clear path to roll up the main company flank, potentially causing a catastrophic collapse of the entire defensive line. He was the cork in the bottle. He had to hold. The initial shock of the assault gave way to a cold, focused determination. The fate of his company now rested entirely on his shoulders. As the Japanese infantry surged closer, they changed tactics. Realizing the lone rifleman was putting up a stubborn defense, they began to lob Type 97 fragmentation grenades into his trench. The first explosive landed with a soft thud near his feet. Without a moment's hesitation, Gurung snatched it up and hurled it back towards the enemy lines, where it detonated among the attackers. Seconds later, a second grenade landed in the trench. Again, he reacted with lightning speed, grabbing the small, finned cylinder and throwing it clear just before it exploded. He was fighting on pure instinct, his body moving faster than conscious thought. The Japanese soldiers, now just yards from his position, were relentless. They threw a third grenade. This one landed closer, right beside him. As Gurung reached for it with his right hand, his luck ran out. The grenade detonated. The explosion was deafening, a blinding flash of white light in the darkness. The force of the blast was catastrophic. It blew off most of the fingers on his right hand, shattered his right arm from the elbow down, and sent a spray of red-hot shrapnel tearing into his face, body, and right leg. The pain was immediate, unimaginable, and all-encompassing. He was thrown back against the wall of the trench, his vision in his right eye gone, his body a canvas of searing agony. Blood poured from dozens of wounds. His primary fighting hand was destroyed. His rifle arm was a mangled wreck. For any ordinary soldier, this would have been the end. The shock and trauma of such devastating injuries would be completely incapacitating. He was blinded in one eye, his body was riddled with shrapnel, and his right arm was useless. The enemy was at the very edge of his trench, preparing to overrun his position and finish him off. He had every reason to surrender to the pain, to give up. But Lachhiman Gurung was not an ordinary soldier. In that moment of supreme agony, something else took over. An unbreakable will and the ancient warrior spirit of his people. Lying in the dirt, deafened by the explosion and blinded by pain and blood, Lachhiman Gurung made a decision. He would not die cowering in a trench. He would not surrender his post. He would embody the motto of his people. With a surge of adrenaline that defied his horrific injuries, he struggled to get back into a fighting position. He looked at his ruined right hand and shattered arm, the source of his agony, and dismissed it. He still had his left hand. He still had his rifle. And he still had the will to fight. He fumbled for his Lee Enfield rifle, a weapon that requires two hands to operate effectively. He managed to cradle the heavy weapon with his mangled right arm, using it as a crude support. With his good left hand, he began the painstaking process of loading and firing. To work the bolt-action mechanism, a sequence of lifting the handle, pulling it back to eject the spent cartridge, pushing it forward to chamber a new round, and locking it down. With only one hand is a feat of incredible difficulty and strength, especially under intense enemy fire. Yet this is what he did, again and again and again. As he worked the bolt and fired into the waves of oncoming soldiers, he began to shout. His voice, raw with pain and fury, echoed through the jungle night. He roared in his native language, a defiant challenge to the enemy that was now attempting to climb into his trench. He yelled, "Io Gurkhali," which means the Gurkhas are upon you. And he screamed at them in broken Japanese, a phrase that would become legendary. "Come and fight a Gurkha." His defiant cries had a stunning effect. The Japanese soldiers, accustomed to routing their enemies, were confronted by a single, grievously wounded man who not only refused to die, but was challenging them to face him. It was an act of courage so profound it bordered on madness. He was no longer just a soldier defending a post. He was a force of nature, a primal embodiment of warrior defiance. His shouts were not just a challenge. They were a declaration that this small patch of earth would be paid for in blood. For 4 excruciating hours the battle for the trench raged. Lachhiman Gurung, a lone, one-handed rifleman, held off an entire company. The combat was brutal and at point-blank range. Japanese soldiers repeatedly tried to storm his position, only to be met by a surprisingly steady and accurate fire. Each time a silhouette appeared at the edge of the parapet, Gurung would work the bolt of his rifle with his left hand, aim and fire. The process was agonizingly slow. He had to brace the rifle against the trench wall, use his body to lever the bolt open and closed, and somehow load fresh clips of 303 ammunition, all while bleeding profusely and fighting off waves of shock and pain. The air grew thick with the smell of cordite and blood. The barrel of his Lee Enfield would have been scorching hot, burning his supporting arm. The recoil from the powerful rifle, a weapon known for its kick, would have jarred his shattered body with every shot. Yet he never stopped. He fired until his ammunition was nearly exhausted, meticulously conserving his shots for confirmed targets. He fought through the darkness, through the pain, through the exhaustion. The Japanese forces, unable to comprehend how a single man could be holding them back, were thrown into confusion. Their attack stalled. The momentum of their assault was broken against the unyielding defense of one grievously wounded soldier. He was a ghost, a demon in the dark who refused to be silenced. His continuous fire and defiant shouts created the illusion of a much larger, still active defensive force, preventing the Japanese from simply bypassing him and attacking the main company line. He was buying his comrades precious time to organize their defenses. Every shot he fired, every enemy soldier he stopped, was a victory against impossible odds. The 4-hour ordeal was a testament to human endurance, a display of willpower so extreme it almost defies belief. He was not just fighting the Japanese. He was fighting his own body's urge to shut down, to surrender to the trauma. But the Gurkha spirit and the promise to never be a coward kept him conscious, kept him fighting, kept him alive. As the first faint hints of dawn began to break on the morning of May 13th, the ferocity of the Japanese assault finally began to wane. The attack had been broken. Demoralized and having taken heavy casualties, the surviving Japanese soldiers melted back into the jungle. An eerie silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the groans of the wounded. Soon after, reinforcements from Gurung's company cautiously made their way forward to the now quiet outpost. What they found was a scene of utter carnage. The area around the trench was a testament to the night's ferocious battle. They found Lachhiman Gurung, still alive, but just barely. He was slumped in his trench, leaning against the blood-soaked earth, his rifle still clutched in his left hand. He was weak from blood loss, his body a patchwork of horrific injuries, but he was conscious. His 2 comrades were also found, alive but severely wounded. The ground in front of Gurung's position was littered with the bodies of Japanese soldiers. The relieving soldiers began the grim task of counting the dead. They counted 87 Japanese bodies in the immediate vicinity of the assault. Of those, 31 lay directly in front of Gurung's trench, some just feet from where he had made his stand. The sheer number was staggering. It seemed impossible that one man, let alone one who was so terribly wounded, could have inflicted such casualties and held off such a determined attack. The men of his company looked at the diminutive rifleman, then at the field of carnage before him, with a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had heard his defiant shouts throughout the night, but they could not have imagined the reality of his lonely fight. He had not just held his post, he had single-handedly stopped a major enemy offensive in its tracks. His actions had almost certainly saved his company from being overrun, and had preserved the integrity of the entire battalion's defensive line. Word of his incredible stand spread like wildfire through the 14th Army. It was a story of heroism so extreme that it immediately became the stuff of legend. Lachhiman Gurung was evacuated from the front lines, his life hanging by a thread. The medical staff who treated him were astonished that he had survived his injuries, let alone continued to fight. His right arm had to be amputated below the elbow, and he permanently lost the sight in his right eye. His body would forever carry the scars and the shrapnel from that night in Taungdaw. As he began the long and painful road to recovery, the wheels of official recognition were already turning. His commanding officers, having pieced together the events of that night from the physical evidence and the testimony of his wounded comrades, were unanimous in their recommendation. There was only one award suitable for such an act of valor: the Victoria Cross. The Victoria Cross, or VC, is the highest and most prestigious award for gallantry in the face of the enemy that can be awarded to British and Commonwealth forces. Instituted by Queen Victoria in 1856, it is awarded for valor in the presence of the enemy. It is a simple bronze cross, cast from the cannons captured at Sebastopol during the Crimean War, bearing the inscription "For Valor." Its simplicity belies its immense significance. To receive the VC is to be recognized as among the bravest of the brave. The official citation for his award, published in the London Gazette, detailed his actions with stark, powerful language. It concluded that his outstanding gallantry and extreme devotion to duty, in the face of almost overwhelming odds, were an inspiration to all who saw him. In December 1945, several months after the final surrender of Japan, Rifleman Lachhiman Gurung stood before the Viceroy of India, Field Marshal Lord Wavell, at a grand ceremony held at the historic Red Fort in Delhi. His small frame stood proud as the Viceroy pinned the bronze cross to his chest. He was now one of only 13 Nepalese Gurkhas in history to receive this ultimate honor, a permanent testament to a night of unimaginable courage. The Victoria Cross ceremony at the Red Fort was a moment of immense pride, but it also highlighted the profound human cost of Gurung's heroism. Standing on the parade ground was a young man forever changed by the war. He was now missing a hand and an eye, his body a map of scars. His fighting days were over, but perhaps the most moving story of the ceremony was not about Gurung himself, but about his family. News of his award had reached his remote village in Nepal. His father, An elderly farmer who had likely never traveled far from his home was determined to witness his son's great honor. With no roads or modern transportation available, the journey was an epic undertaking. Villagers, filled with pride for their local hero, took turns carrying the old man in a ceremonial basket, known as a doko, on their backs. For 11 days, they trekked over rugged mountain passes and through dense forests, a pilgrimage of honor to see their son receive his medal. This incredible journey speaks volumes about the community and the values that produced a man like Lachhiman Gurung. It underscores that behind the celebrated soldier was a family and a village, and that the cost of war is felt not just by those on the battlefield, but by the loved ones they leave behind. After the war, Lachhiman Gurung's life took a different path. Though he remained in the army for a time, his injuries prevented him from continuing his service as a rifleman. He eventually returned to a quiet life, a humble hero who rarely spoke of his wartime experiences. He had paid a heavy price for his bravery. Daily life with only one hand and partial sight would have been a constant challenge. Yet he bore his burdens with the same quiet dignity and resilience he had shown in the trench. He had faced down death, defied impossible odds, and lived. His survival was as much a testament to his strength as his actions in the battle itself. His story is a powerful reminder that the cost of heroism is real and lasting, etched into the bodies and minds of those who perform such extraordinary deeds. After his military service, Lachhiman Gurung eventually settled in the United Kingdom, living a modest and unassuming life. He became a quiet but powerful symbol of the Gurkha legacy and the enduring bond between Nepal and Britain. Despite his incredible fame within military circles, he remained a humble man, content with his family and his community. He passed away in December 2010 at the age of 92. His death was mourned by thousands, from common soldiers to members of the royal family, a testament to the profound impact of his life and his actions. The legacy of Lachhiman Gurung is multifaceted. First and foremost, it is a story of supreme individual courage, a demonstration of the human spirit's capacity to overcome unimaginable adversity. His stand at Taungdaw is now a core part of Gurkha lore, a story told to every new recruit as the ultimate example of their regiment's ethos. He perfectly embodied the motto, "Better to die than be a coward," choosing to fight on against certain death when lesser men would have faltered. His story also serves as a powerful reminder of the forgotten army and the brutal Burma Campaign. While the war in Europe often dominates historical narratives, the fighting in Southeast Asia was just as critical and, in many ways, more savage. The victory in Burma was hard-won, built on the sacrifices of men like Gurung from across the Commonwealth. His legend ensures that their struggle is not forgotten. More broadly, Lachhiman Gurung represents the very essence of the Gurkha soldier: disciplined, incredibly resilient, loyal, and possessing a level of courage that is almost beyond comprehension. His story, and others like it, are why the Gurkhas are universally regarded as among the finest and most feared infantry soldiers in the world. From the trenches of World War I to the deserts of Afghanistan, Their reputation for valor is unparalleled. Lachhiman Gurung did not just save his company on that dark night in 1945. He forged a legend that will inspire soldiers and civilians for generations to come, a timeless story of one man's refusal to be broken. Thank you for joining WW2 Heroic Tales. Through the stories of brave souls from World War II, we honor their memory and keep their legacy alive for history and generations to come.